The morning I woke up and realized I couldn't feel the entire left side of my body, I genuinely thought I was dreaming. For a few disoriented seconds, I lay there, struggling to comprehend why my arm wouldn't move, why it lay there, limp and foreign, like it no longer belonged to me. My heart hammered in my chest as panic began to bubble beneath the confusion. I tried to reach for my phone. I could see it sitting on the nightstand, just out of reach. But my arm, it simply refused to obey me. It was like shouting into a void, expecting an echo and receiving only suffocating silence. My body, this strong, dependable vessel that had carried me through every challenge, every heartbreak, every triumph, had suddenly turned against me. "Help," I whispered. The sound barely escaped my lips, frail and broken, vanishing into the stillness of the room. But no one was there. No one heard. It wasn't until nearly 12 hours later that someone found me. My son, Marcus, my sweet boy. He wasn't a boy anymore, but in that moment, as his face came into view, twisted in a frantic cocktail of horror and concern, all I could see was the child I had once held in my arms. "Oh my God, Mom, Mom," he shouted, his voice shaking as he knelt beside me. His hands fumbled for his phone. "I'm calling an ambulance. Stay with me, okay? Stay with me." I remember lying there, staring up at him, thinking, thank God for my children. If only I had known then how naive that thought truly was. The days that followed became a blur of white ceilings, flickering fluorescent lights, the sterile sting of antiseptic, and the constant beeping of machines that seemed to synchronize with the racing of my heart. Doctors hovered around me like clouds, speaking not to me, but about me, as though I was a subject in a case study rather than a woman who could hear every word. Phrases like significant neurological damage, possible long-term rehabilitation, and guardianship discussions floated over my head as though I didn't exist. I was 58 years old, 58, still full of life, still planning the next chapter of my existence, and yet, suddenly, I was being treated like an incapable child, fragile and incapable of making her own decisions. "Mom, we're handling everything," my daughter Clara would say, her voice wrapped in a sugary patience that barely masked her condescension. She'd pat my hand, always flashing that diamond ring her husband and I had picked out together 2 years earlier. A ring I had carefully chosen while imagining her bright future. "You just focus on getting better," she would add, smiling in a way that felt both loving and suffocating. My youngest, Noah, rarely visited. When he did, his eyes barely left his phone. He was always quick to shoot sharp, pointed questions at the doctors, focusing less on my recovery and more on my prognosis, specifically my cognitive faculties. As if I weren't sitting right there. Yes, the stroke had mangled my speech. Yes, my limbs betrayed me, leaving me with the unsteady grace of a newborn fool. But my mind was as sharp as ever. That's what terrified me the most. I could see everything, every whispered conversation, every lingering glance exchanged over my hospital bed. I was trapped, fully aware, in a body that had temporarily lost its ability to fight back. 3 weeks later, they moved me to a rehabilitation center. That's when the first true crack appeared, the first glimpse that something was very, very wrong. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harper, but your card has been declined," the nurse said, her voice awkward as she shifted uncomfortably in front of my wheelchair. It won't process." "That's impossible," I said. The words came out a little garbled, the slur lingering from my damaged speech, but clear enough to convey disbelief. "Try again." She did. Same result. Panic started to twist in my gut. Something wasn't right. The next day, after wrestling through the maddening maze of the bank's automated phone system, my impaired speech turning every step into an exhausting battle, I finally got a human on the line. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harper," the representative said, voice clipped and formal. "There's currently a hold on all your accounts." "A hold?" I asked, feeling the air thin around me. "Why?" "There's a pending guardianship petition. You'll need to speak with the court-appointed attorney assigned to the case." I gripped the phone tighter. My fingers trembled. What? Guardianship? A pause, the kind that speaks volumes. The petition was filed by Marcus Harper, Clara Bennett, and Noah Harper. The room tilted. My head spun. My children. My own children. My children had filed to take legal control of my life without telling me. That night, I lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling above my hospital bed, listening to the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant shuffle of nurses down the hall. The betrayal pressed against my chest like a weight I could not lift. I had raised them alone. When their father walked out, when Noah was barely 3 years old, it was me who picked up the pieces. Me who worked 2 jobs, stretched every dollar, skipped meals to pay for their soccer cleats, their dance costumes, their field trips. Me who stood clapping at every science fair, every piano recital, every tiny milestone of their lives. I had given them everything, everything. And now, this? The next day, Clara arrived at the rehab facility with a bouquet of cheerful daisies, acting as if everything was fine, like there wasn't a knife already lodged between my ribs. "The doctor says you're making progress, Mom," she said brightly, sitting at the edge of my bed. "But, well, we've been thinking. The house is too big for you now. Too many stairs, too much upkeep. We're looking at some lovely assisted living places. You'll love them." "My house?" I asked, feigning confusion. My fingers twitched against the bedsheets. "But where will all my things go?" "Don't worry about that," Clara said, brushing an imaginary speck off her designer jeans. "Marcus and I have already started sorting through everything. We've found some beautiful pieces that will look gorgeous in my dining room. And Noah's taking your car. You won't be driving anymore, obviously." The air left my lungs. They were already dividing my life, my home, my possessions. While I lay here, half paralyzed, fighting to reclaim my body, they were carving up the bones of everything I'd built. "That's thoughtful," I managed to croak. But in that moment, something inside me, something primal and sharp and made of steel, snapped awake. I would not let this be the end of my story. For the next several weeks, I played their game. I let Clara believe her gentle hand pats and syrupy smiles were working. I let Marcus think his patronizing explanations about simplifying my affairs were convincing. And I let Noah stay buried in his phone, detached, as if his half-hearted presence excused him from the choices they were making. All the while, beneath the mask of a confused, compliant patient, my determination grew teeth. If they thought I was weak, if they truly believed they could quietly steal my life out from under me, they had no idea who they were dealing with. During therapy, I pushed harder than I ever had in my life. Natalie, my physical therapist, noticed it immediately. "You're fighting like hell," she muttered one afternoon, bracing me as I wobbled forward, gripping the parallel bars like my life depended on it. "But fighting for what?" I paused. Her question wasn't innocent. She had seen it before. The fire that burns in someone who isn't just recovering, but reclaiming. "My freedom," I whispered. "Every last inch of it." Natalie didn't say anything, but the corner of her mouth twitched upward in the barest hint of a knowing smile. It was a few days later when I overheard them, the conversation that confirmed my worst fears. I was sitting in my room, staring out the window, practicing squeezing and releasing a stress ball in my left hand, when their voices floated through the hallway just outside my door. They didn't bother lowering them. Why would they? As far as they knew, I was harmless, powerless. "The lawyer says once the guardianship is finalized, we can move forward with selling the house," Marcus was saying, his tone as casual as if he were discussing a grocery list. "The market's hot, should fetch at least $400,000. "Good," Clara replied. What about Mom's retirement accounts? Almost twice that, Marcus said, his voice tightening slightly. We'll divide everything equally. It's what Mom would have wanted. And if she objects? Clara asked, her tone suddenly sharp. That edge I recognized, the one that came out when she didn't get her way. Marcus let out a short, bitter laugh. Look at her, Clara. She can barely hold a fork. The judge will take one look and hand us full control. It's for her own good anyway. For her own good. The words clanged in my ears like a cruel bell. I squeezed the stress ball so hard it nearly split in my palm. No, 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 no. This wasn't happening. This was not my life. That night, long after the fluorescent lights dimmed and the hallways grew quiet, I sat awake staring at the ceiling, pulse pounding like war drums in my ears. It was time to stop playing defense. It was time to fight back. My mind sifted rapidly through everyone I'd ever known, anyone I could trust. There weren't many. Decades of single motherhood hadn't left much space for deep friendships. But then a name surfaced, sudden and bright, like a flare in the night. Raymond. Ray. My late sister's husband, the family black sheep. The one the kids always side-eyed at holidays, with his long gray ponytail and his stubborn refusal to play by anyone's rules but his own. He lived off the grid, out in Seabreeze Cove, a tiny coastal town none of my children had ever even visited. They'd always written him off as an eccentric nobody. Perfect. I dragged myself over to the nurse's station the next morning, feigning interest in checking my email. I wasn't there to check anything. My hands trembled as I typed. Ray, it's Evelyn. I need help. They're trying to take everything. Please, please. It felt both terrifying and ridiculous to hit send. Could he even help? Would he? But 3 days later, as I was struggling through a particularly grueling session with Natalie, she leaned in, lowering her voice. There's a man in the lobby asking for you. Says he's your brother-in-law. Looks unconventional. I almost collapsed into her arms. Ray, I breathed. He came. He looked exactly as I remembered. Weathered, a little scruffy, with sun-creased skin and those sharp, intelligent eyes that missed absolutely nothing. His long gray hair was pulled back into that signature ponytail, and a battered duffel bag hung from his shoulder. Jesus, Evelyn, he muttered the moment he stepped into my room. You look like hell. Despite everything, despite the knot of fear and anger lodged in my chest, I laughed, a raw, croaky sound, but real. Always the charmer, I rasped. He didn't smile. He pulled a chair close to the bed, his eyes scanning me from head to toe, full of something I hadn't seen in weeks, genuine concern. Not pity, not calculation, just care. Your emails scared the hell out of me, he said. Tell me everything. So I did. Every broken detail. The stroke, the endless hospital days, the creeping realization that my children, the people I had poured my life into, were quietly stripping me of everything I owned, everything I was. Ray's face darkened with every word, his hands clenched into fists more than once. Those ungrateful little... He cut himself off, shaking his head. After everything, after all you did for them. They see me as an obstacle now, I said, my throat tightening. Not their mother, just something between them and my money. Ray leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. What do you need from me, Evie? The use of the old nickname almost broke me. I need time, I said, and I need someone on the outside I can trust. They've frozen all my accounts, but they don't know about everything. A flicker of curiosity crossed his face. Go on. After I sold my parents' old farm years ago, I opened an account at a tiny credit union, separate, quiet. There's about 70 grand in there. It was supposed to be for emergencies. Well, Ray said, sitting back with a grim smile, this sounds like an emergency. A shaky laugh escaped me. Yeah, it does. "I've got a place out in Seabreeze Cove," he offered. "Cabin, rustic, nobody bothers me out there. Nobody'll think to look for you." Relief hit me so hard it made my eyes sting. Perfect. "First step," he said, nodding, "we get you access to that account before they sniff it out. After that, we make them think they've already won." Over the next week, Ray became my partner in crime. He showed up daily, slipping me a prepaid phone the kids didn't know about. Whenever they visited, I put on my best performance, the helpless, confused, grateful mother. I let them guide me, pat my hand, explain things like I was too simple to understand. I signed whatever papers they handed me, smiling vacantly as they told me how smoothly things were progressing. "We found the perfect assisted living place, Mom," Clara chirped one afternoon, positively beaming. "Meadowview Residence. Oh, you'll love it. They have movie nights and a koi pond." "And the house," Marcus added, "sold. We close next week. Over asking, can you believe it?" "You kids," I said, pressing a hand to my chest, voice trembling just enough to sell it. "You're so thoughtful." Inside, my hands curled into fists. Every day, I worked harder. Every grueling therapy session became a battleground. Natalie would glance at me with a raised brow as I gritted my teeth and forced my stiff limbs to obey. "You're like a woman possessed," she commented one afternoon, steadying me as I practiced stepping without the walker. "I am," I said, panting between steps, "possessed by survival." Ray, meanwhile, was executing our plan with meticulous precision. He drove to the little credit union in Seabreeze Cove with a notarized letter I'd signed years ago, before the stroke, authorizing him as my proxy in emergencies. Thankfully, this wasn't one of those faceless megabanks. This was a place where tellers still remembered my parents, a place where personal relationships mattered more than policies. "They were more than happy to help," Ray said the day he returned, slipping a debit card into my hand, my name glinting in silver against the plastic. "It's done. The money's moved to a new account. Only you can touch it now." For the first time in weeks, I felt my lungs expand fully. A win. A small but powerful win. 2 weeks after Ray arrived, my children showed up together, an event rare enough to instantly set my nerves on edge. Clara wore that bright, brittle smile that always meant trouble. Marcus had his "I'm in charge" stance locked in. Noah trailed behind, his phone conspicuously absent for once. "Mom, we have great news," Clara announced, her eyes practically sparkling. "The judge approved our petition. We're officially your legal guardians now." "It means," Marcus said, adopting his lawyerly tone, "we can take care of all your affairs, make decisions about your care, your finances, everything." "You don't have to worry about a thing," Noah chimed in, not meeting my gaze. "It's all handled." "And," Clara added brightly, "the house sold. Closed the deal yesterday. We got over asking. Isn't that wonderful?" I swallowed hard, forcing my face into what I hoped passed for gratitude. "My home," I said softly, "gone." "But you won't need it, Mom," Clara rushed to reassure me. "We've packed up what you'll take to Meadowview. It's such a lovely place." "How thoughtful," I murmured, folding my hands in my lap. "I'm just so lucky to have such caring children." They smiled. They actually smiled. They believed they had won. That night, Ray and I finalized everything. My official discharge was scheduled for Monday. Their plan was simple: pick me up from rehab and drive me straight to Meadowview, where I'd spend the rest of my life tucked away like some fragile porcelain doll. But they didn't know what I knew. I wouldn't be there. Sunday night, after the staff had done their final rounds, Ray rolled me out through a side entrance. His friend, someone who owed him a favor, waited in a dented van parked just beyond the security cameras. It wasn't exactly a cinematic escape. No alarms, no chases, Just the soft hum of tires on pavement as the facility faded into the distance behind us. Still, my heart hammered so loud it drowned out everything else. As the van pulled onto the highway, I turned to look back one last time. The rehab center stood still, unknowing, under the faint glow of streetlights. I was free. The drive to Seabreeze Cove took nearly 5 hours, winding through coastal highways where the ocean occasionally appeared between clusters of pine trees, glinting silver in the moonlight. Ray's cabin was everything he'd promised, modest, weathered, perched on a hillside that offered an unobstructed view of the sea. A hastily built ramp led up to the front door. "It's just temporary," Ray said, catching my glance. "Once you're walking steady, I'll yank it down. You won't need it." "It's perfect," I told him, and I meant it. Through the front windows, the ocean stretched out endlessly, vast and untamable, a mirror of how I felt, bruised, battered, but finally out of the cage. Ray wasted no time setting me up. A local therapist, Susan, visited twice a week. Semi-retired, but sharp as a whip, Susan reminded me of myself, practical, no nonsense, and unwilling to entertain pity. During our first session, as she adjusted the walker and guided me through balance exercises, she asked, "So, your family thinks you're tucked away in some cushy facility, huh?" "Exactly," I said, focusing on placing one foot firmly in front of the other. "And what happens when they realize I'm not?" She smiled, but there was a glint in her eyes. "Let me guess. You've got a plan." I nodded, pushing harder. "Not yet. Right now, I've got something more important to focus on." "And what's that?" she asked, steadying me as I released the walker for a brief, shaky moment. "Getting strong enough to never need anyone's help again." What I didn't tell Susan, what I hadn't even fully admitted to myself, was the dull, constant ache underneath all this. Grief. Because no matter how angry I was, no matter how determined, these were my children, my flesh, my blood. And when I had needed them most, when I was at my lowest, most vulnerable, they had treated me not as their mother, but a burden, a problem to solve, an asset to divide. Sometimes the sadness was so heavy it felt like a physical thing sitting on my chest. But I didn't allow myself to sink into it. Not yet. There would be time for grief later, after I was strong, after I had taken back what was mine. What I didn't anticipate was how far my children would go, or how quickly things would spiral. The first month in Seabreeze Cove passed in a blur of rehab exercises, quiet walks along the cliffside, and long evenings sitting on the porch with Ray, watching the sun melt into the horizon. Then one night, as we sat sipping coffee, Ray's phone buzzed. "Frankie down at the hardware store," he explained, answering. A pause. His eyes narrowed. "Yeah? Uh-huh. You're kidding." He hung up and turned to me, expression grim. "They reported you missing." I blinked. "What?" "Yeah, police are involved." "But since the rehab staff saw you leave voluntarily, it's not considered an abduction. Still, things are getting messy back home." I swallowed. "And them? What about Marcus, Clara, and Noah?" Ray sighed. "They're turning on each other. Noah's accusing Clara and Marcus of hiding you to cut him out of the money. Clara's saying Noah's behind it. Marcus is threatening lawsuits. Total chaos." I should have felt satisfaction, should have savored the idea of them devouring each other over the scraps. Instead, all I felt was hollow. A grief so sharp it nearly doubled me over. Had it really come to this? It should have felt like victory. Watching them unravel, seeing the perfect little facade of unity crack and splinter into sharp-edged pieces, should have brought me some kind of satisfaction. But instead, it felt like standing in the middle of a burning house that I had spent my entire life building. Ray noticed the shift in me. He didn't say anything right away, just refilled my coffee, handed it to me with a quiet nod, and sat beside me on the porch as the tide rolled in and out. A few days later, the news got worse. Or better. I couldn't quite tell anymore. "They've started spending the money," Ray reported, pacing the cabin floor, a mixture of disbelief and fury darkening his face. "Marcus bought himself a brand new Lexus. Clara's gutting her kitchen, some fancy renovation with marble counters and custom cabinets. And Noah, he's talking about opening a startup." "My money," I muttered, fingers tightening around the ceramic mug in my hands. "They're blowing my money." "The savings you built over decades," Ray said, shaking his head. "All those extra shifts, those nights you went without, gone." I stared out the window toward the ocean. It was wild today, angry waves battering the shore, as if the sea itself shared my rage. "Let them spend it," I said, after a long silence. The bitterness in my voice startled even me. "Let them think they've won. Every last cent." But it wasn't that simple. I could lie to Ray, maybe even to myself. But at night, when the cabin grew still and the wind pressed against the windows like restless ghosts, the truth slipped in. I dreamed of the rehab center, of lying helpless as my children sold my memories, piece by piece. The china set that had belonged to my grandmother, the old oak dining table I'd saved for years to buy, the books lined neatly on the shelves that had once been bedtime stories. I'd wake gasping, tangled in sweat-damp sheets, my heart pounding. As the weeks passed, Seabreeze Cove slowly became more than just a hideout. It started to feel like home. The town was small, unassuming, the kind of place where folks minded their own business, but always had a smile ready. I began venturing out with Ray, first to the little diner near the harbor, where the waitress, Betty, would wave from behind the counter the second we walked in. "You're looking better every day, honey," she'd say, topping off my coffee before I could even ask. She was right. 3 months after my escape, I could walk with just a cane. My speech was smoother now, the slur almost completely gone. Every day felt like a reclaiming of something I'd lost: balance, strength, autonomy. Ray even put me to work helping with his woodworking business. Not the physical labor, but the numbers. Managing orders, handling invoices. My old accountant brain slipped back into gear like it had never left. It felt good. Not just surviving, but living. One crisp autumn morning, I was sitting at Betty's counter alone. Ray had gone to deliver a custom table to a client, when the bell above the diner door jingled. I didn't look up until I heard a voice I hadn't expected to hear again. "Mom." My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. I turned. Noah stood in the doorway, thinner than I remembered, dark circles under his eyes. His gaze darted nervously around the diner until it landed on me. Time seemed to pause. Everything else, the chatter, the clinking of plates, the hum of the coffee machine, faded into a dull roar. For a second, neither of us moved. Then, slowly, as if approaching a wild animal, Noah crossed the floor and slid onto the stool beside me. "Everyone's been looking for you," he said, his voice brittle, tight. We thought something terrible happened." I set my cup down carefully, buying time to steady the storm building in my chest. I left a note. His cheeks flushed with sudden color. If I was a burden, you didn't have to carry it like this. You could have told us. But this, just disappearing, that's cruel." Cruel. The word sliced through me like a knife. Cruel. I turned to him, my hands curling into fists on the countertop. "Cruel," I repeated quietly. "Cruel is deciding I'm incompetent without ever having a conversation with me. Cruel is selling my house while I was learning how to walk again. Cruel is dividing my possessions like I was already dead." Noah flinched. His eyes dropped to his hands, twisting nervously in his lap. I didn't. We were trying to help you," he stammered. "Marcus and Clara, they pushed for it. I went along because the doctor said." "Because it was easier," I finished for him. "Easier than facing me. Easier than dealing with the fear of what might happen. Easier to take control than to actually ask what I needed." He said nothing. I stared at him, this man who had once been my baby boy, who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares, who cried when his goldfish died. My throat burned. "And the house? My car? My retirement accounts?" I asked, my voice shaking, not with weakness, but with fury barely held in check. "All just, what, spoils of war?" Noah's shoulders sagged. His hands gripped the edge of the counter like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "I know how it looks," he whispered. "But things are falling apart now. Marcus and Clara, they're suing each other. Over the money, over everything. They're saying terrible things. The police, they're asking questions about elder abuse, fraud. It's bad, Mom. We're all in serious trouble." Ah, there it was. Not guilt, not love, not regret. Fear. He hadn't come because he missed me. He'd come because the consequences were finally catching up. "What do you want from me, Noah?" I asked, folding my arms. He dragged a shaky hand through his hair, the same nervous gesture he'd had since childhood. "Just come back. Just tell everyone you left willingly, that you're okay, that we didn't do anything illegal." A laugh tore out of me, sharp, ugly. Heads turned in the diner, but I didn't care. "You want me to bail you out?" I asked, staring him down. "You want me to lie?" "Mom, please, we're your children." Those words, as if they were a magic spell that erased everything that had come before. "I need to think," I said finally, pushing back from the counter. "Where are you staying?" "The Oceanside Lodge, room 12. I nodded. "I'll let you know." He stood, hesitated, as if he wanted to say something else, some apology, some plea, but couldn't quite get the words out. I really am glad you're okay," he said at last. You look good, Mom." Then he turned and walked out. I sat there for a long time after he left, my coffee going cold in front of me. Betty didn't say a word. She just refilled it quietly and rested her hand on my shoulder before moving on. That night, as the sky turned violet over the sea, I stood at the edge of the water, arms wrapped tightly around myself. Ray found me there. "Noah found me," I said quietly, not even turning. Ray tensed. "How?" "I don't know. Doesn't matter." I finally turned to him. "He wants me to come back, wants me to fix it, make it all go away." Ray was quiet for a long moment. Then, simply, he asked, "And what do you want, Evie?" It was such a simple question, and yet it cracked something wide open inside me. What did I want? Revenge? Peace? My family back? My dignity? My future? All of it. None of it. "I want justice," I said finally, my voice steady. "But more than that, I want to be free." Ray nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time to stop hiding." His gaze was steady, solid, unshakable. "Not for them," he added softly. "Not to save them, but for you." Ray's words settled over me like a weight, and yet, paradoxically, like a key turning in a long rusted lock. He was right. I hadn't just run to get away from them. I had run to survive, to recover, to breathe air that wasn't poisoned by betrayal. But now it was time to stop running. "Will you come with me?" I asked, the vulnerability in my voice almost shocking me. Ray's grin was instant. "Try and stop me." That night, we sat at the cabin's scarred oak table, drawing up a plan with pen and paper, like two old-school conspirators. It wasn't complicated, but it was bold. I would confront them, face to face, not individually, not in whispered, guilt-laden conversations. All three of them, together. No running, no hiding, no more games. "Call him," Ray said, sliding my phone toward me. "Set it up, on your terms." With hands only barely trembling, I dialed Noah. He answered on the first ring. "Mom?" "I'll meet you," I said, "but not alone. You, Marcus, and Clara, all of you, at the Oceanside Lodge, conference room, tomorrow at noon." A pause, then hurried, nervous. "I don't know if that's—" "Those are my terms," I cut him off. "Take them or leave them. But if you don't show, I disappear again, this time for good." The silence on the line was thick. I could hear his breath stuttering. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay. Tomorrow. Noon." I slept little that night. Ray sat up with me, helping me organize everything: the documents, the medical records from Susan and my new doctor, the notarized evaluations that clearly stated what my children had tried to pretend wasn't true. That I was competent, that I was capable, that I was not, and never had been, the fragile, witless invalid they tried to paint me as. We printed everything, 3 identical packets, each filled with proof, with truth. By morning, I felt exhausted, but clear, sharper than I had since the day my body betrayed me. The Oceanside Lodge's conference room was as bland as they come: beige walls, laminate floors, long wooden table surrounded by 8 mismatched chairs. A single window overlooked the parking lot instead of the ocean. Perfect, I thought, completely void of comfort. Ray and I arrived 20 minutes early. He carried the briefcase with the documents. I set up my laptop on the table, opening it to the folder that held the video I'd recorded the night before, a detailed, precise retelling of everything that had happened since my stroke. Every betrayal, every theft, every lie. At exactly 11:59, the door opened. Noah entered first. His eyes immediately found me, nervous, darting. Behind him came Marcus, stiff as a board, his lawyer's mask firmly in place. And then Clara, looking tired, wary, her lips pressed into a brittle, colorless line. They all stopped cold when they saw me. I was standing. No walker, no wheelchair, just me, upright, cane in hand, gaze steady. "Mom," Clara breathed, You look—" "Different," I offered, my voice cool. "Capable? Strong enough to be declared competent, wouldn't you say?" Marcus recovered first, stepping forward with that falsely warm smile that had probably charmed many a courtroom. "Mom, we've been worried sick." "The police?" "I know, and frankly, I don't care." Noah opened his mouth, but Marcus shot him a look, cutting him off. "We were only trying to protect you," Clara blurted, the tremor in her voice betraying her. "Were you?" I asked quietly. "Because from where I stand, it looked a lot more like you were protecting my bank accounts." I nodded to Ray, who opened the briefcase and laid 3 folders on the table. "Sit," I said. "We have a lot to discuss." Reluctantly, they did. I noticed the way they spread out, not like a united front, but like wary animals, each calculating whether they should fight or flee. "I know what you did," I began. My voice didn't tremble. "I know about the guardianship petition you filed behind my back, about selling my house, about freezing my accounts." "Mom," Marcus tried, but I cut him off with a raised hand. "I'm not finished." I leaned forward, meeting each of their eyes in turn. I also know you've been spending the money. The house, the retirement fund, the car, the inheritance I protected from my parents, the savings I built working 2 jobs while raising you. None of them could hold my gaze. And now, I continued, you're facing consequences. Police, investigations, lawsuits. I clicked the laptop. The video began to play. My own voice filled the room. Clear, steady, undeniable. In it, I outlined everything. The stroke, the recovery, the betrayal. Alongside the video were the medical evaluations, confirming my mental competence, my physical progress, my capacity to manage my own life. When the video ended, I closed the laptop and slid the folders toward them. Here's how this is going to go, I said, folding my hands. You will return everything, every penny, the proceeds from the house sale, what's left in the accounts, anything you've spent. You'll sell back whatever you bought. You will sign the attached agreements transferring full control of my finances, my legal status, and my life back to me. I let the silence stretch. In exchange, I won't press charges for elder abuse, or fraud, or theft. The weight of the air in the room was suffocating. Marcus was the first to speak. He flipped through the folder, his jaw tightening. This is blackmail. This, I corrected, is accountability, something the 3 of you seem wildly unfamiliar with. We don't have all the money, Noah whispered, eyes wide. Some of it's gone. Then sell the Lexus, Marcus, I said without blinking. Cancel the kitchen renovation, Clara. Liquidate your startup, Noah. This isn't fair, Clara's voice cracked, her hands shaking as she gripped the folder. We were scared. We didn't know what else to do. Did you ever, even for a second, stop to think how I felt? My voice rose, not with a shout, but with something heavier, sadder. When you packed my life into boxes, when you sold my home, my car, when you split up the belongings I'd spent a lifetime working for. Tears glistened in Clara's eyes. Marcus's face had gone pale. Noah sat perfectly still, looking like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. I gave everything to you, I continued, softer now. Every sacrifice, every choice I made, every sleepless night, every shift I worked. I never asked for anything in return. Not until now. I stood, letting the chair scrape back deliberately. You have 3 days to sign. If you don't, the video and every piece of evidence go straight to the authorities. I walk into the police station myself. As I gathered the laptop and slid it into my bag, the door behind me opened. A tall man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes stepped inside, scanning the room. "Excuse me," he said, glancing around. "I'm looking for Evelyn Harper." I blinked. "That's me." "I'm Dr. Alan Whitaker," he said, offering his hand. "I've been consulting on stroke recovery cases with Susan. She mentioned your progress, and I've been trying to get in touch. I was hoping to discuss your recovery for a study I'm conducting on non-traditional rehabilitation success." Clara shot to her feet. "Oh, great. You're her doctor? Then you can tell her she needs proper care, not—" "Actually," Dr. Whitaker interrupted, his smile tightening, "I've reviewed her file. Her progress is remarkable. In fact, I was hoping to document it." He turned back to me, eyes warm. "Would you have time, perhaps, to discuss it? Maybe over dinner?" For a moment, everything, the tension, the betrayal, the years of exhaustion, paused. A laugh bubbled out of me, a real one. I'd be delighted. Dr. Whitaker's invitation hung in the air, a surreal counterpoint to the tense atmosphere in the room. My children stared, dumbfounded, caught entirely off guard by this sudden, unexpected twist. It was a look I had come to recognize over the past few months, the look people give when the narrative in their head crumbles and they're forced to confront a version of reality they never imagined. I straightened my shoulders, meeting Dr. Whitaker's gaze. "7 o'clock?" I asked, voice calm but resolute. He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. 7 would be perfect. As he stepped out, the spell broke. My children sat frozen, Noah's mouth slightly open, Marcus blinking like he'd forgotten how, and Clara fidgeting with the edge of her folder, her fingers white-knuckled. I suggest, I said, sweeping my gaze over them, you use the next 3 days very wisely. With that, I turned and walked out. Ray followed, the door clicking shut behind us with a finality that made my heart race. In the hallway, I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. My knees trembled slightly, but it wasn't weakness. It was adrenaline, pure, roaring adrenaline. Ray glanced sideways at me. Well, that didn't go how I expected. A smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. No, it went better. We stepped outside into the crisp, salt-tinged air of Seabreeze Cove. The ocean wind tangled through my hair. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt tall, strong, like I had shed something heavy I hadn't even fully realized I'd been carrying. Do you think they'll sign? I asked, my voice softer now. Ray adjusted the strap of his bag. They don't have a choice, Evelyn. You've got them cornered. I nodded, but the truth was more complicated than that. I didn't just want them to sign the papers. I wanted them to understand. To feel, if only for a moment, the betrayal, the abandonment, the suffocating helplessness they had dumped on me. But some things couldn't be taught, not easily, maybe not ever. That evening, as the sky streaked orange and gold, I stood in front of the small mirror in my bedroom, brushing my hair. I caught my reflection, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't see the helpless patient or the fragile mother who needed to be managed. I saw Evelyn Harper, a woman who had been knocked down but refused, absolutely refused, to stay there. For the first time in years, I did something simple, something absurdly mundane. I got dressed for myself, not for doctors, not for family, not because it was expected, but because I wanted to. I chose the soft blue dress I'd bought at the little thrift store in town, the one that brought out the color in my eyes. I applied a touch of lipstick, brushed my hair until it shone, and when I stepped back from the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Not weak, not broken, whole. Dinner with Dr. Whitaker turned out to be nothing like I expected. I assumed it would be clinical, a formal conversation about recovery statistics, mobility exercises, and speech therapy benchmarks. It wasn't. It started with him asking, simply, "So, what was your life like before all this?" Such a simple question, such an enormous one. And somehow, I found myself talking, really talking, about everything. The years spent as an accountant, raising 3 children on my own, the gardening I loved, the trips I took after the kids grew up. I told him about the stroke, the rehab, and yes, even about the betrayal. Not because I wanted sympathy, but because for the first time, someone was asking about me. Not my medical chart, not my assets, not my limitations. Me. Dr. Whitaker listened. Not the polite, nod-along listening that doctors sometimes do, but real listening. When I stumbled over words, he waited. When my voice trembled, he didn't rush to fill the silence. "You've had one hell of a journey," he said softly as I finished. "Most people wouldn't have had the courage to do what you did." I shook my head. I didn't feel brave. I felt desperate. "Sometimes," he replied, smiling gently, "bravery and desperation look exactly the same." The warmth in his eyes wasn't pity. It wasn't obligation. It was respect. We talked for hours, long after our plates had been cleared, long after most of the restaurant emptied out. It wasn't romantic exactly, but it was connection, a deep, unexpected kind of understanding I hadn't realized I was starving for. As he walked me back to Ray's cabin, the conversation drifted to something lighter. "So, what happens after they sign?" he asked, hands tucked in his pockets. I tilted my head, watching the moonlight ripple over the ocean. I hadn't thought that far ahead. "You could stay," he said, surprising me. "Seabreeze Cove could use someone like you. someone resilient, someone brilliant. A laugh bubbled up in my throat. "Are you offering me a job?" "Maybe," he said, grinning. "Or maybe something better." I shook my head, smiling despite myself. "I'll think about it." But even as the joy of that evening lingered, I knew the story wasn't over. The next morning, Ray found me sitting on the porch, watching the waves. "They called," he said, handing me a cup of coffee. My stomach tightened. "All three?" "All three," he confirmed. "They want to meet again. Noon. Same place." Did they say if they signed?" He shook his head. "Didn't say. Just said, we need to talk." I nodded slowly, staring out at the horizon. "Then, let's go." The conference room felt different this time. Smaller, more suffocating. My children were already seated when Ray and I walked in. This time, they sat close together, shoulders almost touching. The united front unsettled me. Something had shifted. Clara was the first to speak. She slid a stack of papers toward me. "I signed," she said, her voice thin but steady. "We all did." I blinked, staring down at the 3 crisp documents. Each one bore their signatures: Clara Bennett, Marcus Harper, Noah Harper. "We're returning everything," Marcus said, his jaw tight. "The money from the house, what's left in the accounts. We've started selling back what we bought." I should have felt triumph, vindication, satisfaction. Instead, I felt something heavier, sadder, more complicated. "Why?" I asked quietly. "Why now?" "We talked," Noah said. "Really talked, last night. For the first time in, I don't know how long." He swallowed, looking down at his hands. "We realized what we did. We failed you, Mom," Clara said, voice cracking. "It wasn't just about the money. It was fear. You were always the strong one, the one who handled everything. Seeing what happened after the stroke, it was easier to take control than to admit how scared we were." "That doesn't excuse it," Marcus added quickly. "Not even close. But we want to make it right. If you'll let us." I stared at them, my heart squeezing so painfully I thought it might shatter. This wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe it was the first step. I sat there for a long moment, fingers grazing the edges of the signed agreements, the paper suddenly feeling heavier than it should. Their faces were unfamiliar, and yet achingly familiar. The same children whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose nightmares I'd chased away, whose college applications I'd proofread late into the night, even when my eyes were heavy from double shifts. And now, here we were, a family, fractured, a family trying, maybe, just maybe, to figure out whether broken things could be put back together. "It won't be easy," I said finally. My voice wasn't cold, just honest. Trust doesn't grow back overnight. "We know," Noah replied softly, nodding. "But we want to try, if you'll let us." For the first time, Clara didn't reach for my hand in that patronizing, too sweet way. Instead, her fingers hovered above the table, hesitant, unsure. "Mom," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "can we rebuild this somehow?" I glanced at Ray, who gave me the smallest of nods, the kind that said, "It's your choice now. It's always been." I turned back to them. "I'll accept the agreements," I said, keeping my tone steady. "And I'm willing to try, to explore what rebuilding might look like." Relief flooded their faces. But I wasn't finished. "But there are conditions." 3 pairs of eyes snapped back to mine. "First," I began, "I'm not moving back. My life is here now, in Seabreeze Cove." Marcus blinked. "Here? You mean permanently?" "Yes," I said firmly. "I've started over, and I'm not giving that up. I've been offered space to open a small accounting practice here." This was technically true. Dr. Whitaker had mentioned that the local businesses were always desperate for someone good with books and taxes. I hadn't committed yet, but the idea had sunk its teeth into me. "Second," I continued, "if we're going to rebuild, it will be as adults, equals. not as your dependent, not as someone who needs managing. I watched the reality of that land in each of their faces, the mental recalibration required to see me not as mom, the safety net, the problem to solve, but as a woman, a person, whole. And third, I said, family therapy. All of us, together. We don't sweep this under the rug. If we're going to heal, we do it right. No shortcuts. A beat of silence. Then, Noah spoke first. That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. Clara nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. More than fair. Marcus sighed, scrubbing a hand down his face. Agreed. And just like that, something shifted. The temperature in the room warmed. Not much, not enough to call it forgiveness, but enough to call it something. A beginning. We spent the next hour sorting logistics, signing paperwork, initiating the reversal of the guardianship, organizing the transfer of funds, discussing the sale of the car, the return of purchases, the settling of debts. It was civil. Occasionally, it was even warm. Not healed, but healing. As they were gathering their things to leave, Clara paused, her gaze flickering toward me. "So, we noticed you had dinner with someone last night," she said, her tone laced with cautious curiosity. "Oh no," Ray murmured under his breath, smothering a grin. I raised a brow. "And?" "Well," Marcus leaned forward slightly, smirking for the first time since this mess began. "Is Dr. Whitaker, is that a professional relationship, or—" I stared at him flatly. "That," I said, gathering my papers into my bag, "that is none of your business." Clara let out a startled laugh. Noah grinned sheepishly. And just for a moment, just a breath of a moment, we were who we used to be, or who we could be again. Later that day, as the tide rolled in, I stood at the edge of the water, the ocean spraying my skin, cool and salty. Ray stood beside me, hands tucked into his jacket pockets. "Well," he said, squinting at the horizon, "that didn't go how I thought it would." "Life rarely does," I replied quietly. He chuckled. "Ain't that the truth?" I exhaled deeply. 6 months ago, I thought my story was ending, that everything I'd built, everything I was crumbling. I tilted my chin toward the horizon. Now I realize it was just the end of a chapter, not the end of the story. Ray nodded. "So, what's next?" I smiled. "First, I'm going to call Dr. Whitaker. I believe I owe him an answer." The sun was beginning to set as I walked back to the cabin, my feet light in the sand. That evening, sitting on the porch with a notebook in my lap and a warm cup of tea in my hands, I began to write. Not a letter, not a complaint, not a journal, a manifesto. Today marks the first day of my new life, not as a victim, not as a mother whose children betrayed her, but as Evelyn Harper, survivor, business owner, woman who refused to be discarded. The stroke tried to take my future. My own children tried to take my independence. But in losing everything, I found something I never expected. Myself. Tomorrow, I sign the lease on a tiny office near the harbor. Next week, our first family therapy session begins. And tonight, I have dinner with a man who sees me not for who I was, but for who I am now. I don't know what happens next in this story, but for the first time in decades, I'm the one writing it. I set the pen down, watching the ink dry beneath the golden glow of the porch light. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. Rebuilding trust with my children would take time. Starting a business at my age, after everything, would be a challenge. And whatever was beginning with Alan, well, that would require a kind of courage I hadn't exercised in a long time. But I had survived betrayal, survived the collapse of everything I thought defined me. I had reclaimed my voice, my dignity, my power. And whatever came next, I would face it standing, on my own 2 feet, in a life that finally, truly belonged to me. Evelyn Harper's story is a powerful reminder that no matter how deeply we are betrayed, even by those we love the most, it is never too late to reclaim our voice, our strength, and our future. After suffering a debilitating stroke, Evelyn found herself not just physically vulnerable, but emotionally discarded by her own children, who plotted to seize control of her life, assets, and identity. But what her children underestimated was the quiet fire of a woman who had spent her entire life surviving, for her family, and eventually for herself. With determination, courage, and the unexpected support of her late sister's husband, Ray, Evelyn rose from a place of helplessness to confront the very people who tried to erase her. This story teaches us that survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about standing up, speaking out, and refusing to be erased. It reminds us that dignity cannot be stolen when you choose to fight for it, and that healing, though painful, is always possible, especially when you take control of your own narrative. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you reflect on the importance of standing your ground, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe for more powerful emotional storytelling, and consider sharing this with someone who might need it. Your support helps keep these stories alive and helps grow our amazing community. And before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Comment below and let me know which country or region you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories reach, and I appreciate every single one of you.